The chill of the autumn air wasn't the only thing that sent shivers down my spine that October evening. My friends and I had always been fascinated by the paranormal, which inevitably led us to the infamous Blackwood Forest, a place rumored to be haunted by the spirits of those lost in its depths. We arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the forest in a twilight that seemed too dark, too soon. As we ventured into the woods, our flashlights pierced the creeping fog, casting eerie shadows among the gnarled trees. The path was rugged, less traveled, with the crunch of dried leaves underfoot breaking the haunting silence. "You guys heard the stories about this place, right?" Sarah asked, her voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Yeah," I replied, "about the hiker who went missing last year? Never found him, just his campsite left untouched." The memory made my heart beat faster, the thrill of fear mixing with a genuine sense of dread. The darkness seemed to press in around us, the forest alive with whispers of the wind. We set up camp near an old, abandoned cabin that Sarah claimed was the center of numerous ghost sightings. The cabin's windows were boarded up, the wood splintered and aged, as if clawed at by the very spirits that haunted it. As night fell, the air grew colder, and the stories began to flow, each one more terrifying than the last. "Did you guys hear that?" Mark suddenly interrupted, his eyes wide as he turned his head towards the dense thicket. We fell silent, straining our ears. A soft rustling came from the direction Mark pointed, growing louder, as if something or someone was approaching. "It's probably just an animal," I tried to reassure myself and the others, but my voice faltered. The rustling stopped, replaced by a low, mournful howl that seemed to echo through the trees. It wasn't like any animal sound I'd ever heard, it was almost human, a sorrowful wail that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We gathered closer around the campfire, the flames casting a warm, but small circle of light against the oppressive blackness of the forest. "Let's try and get some sleep," I suggested, though the thought of closing my eyes in this place filled me with dread. As we crawled into our tents, the silence of the forest seemed to thicken, heavy with unspoken fear. I lay awake, listening to the crackle of the dying fire and the occasional snap of a twig in the distance. Just as I began to drift into a restless sleep, a loud bang jolted me awake. It came from the direction of the cabin. Heart pounding, I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped my tent. The fire was out, the campsite bathed in moonlight that seemed too faint to pierce the darkness. I walked towards the cabin, the beam of my flashlight trembling in my hand. The door to the cabin, previously shut and barred, was now wide open, swinging gently in the breeze as if inviting me in. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and scared in the vastness of the night. There was no reply, only the sound of my own breath and the distant howl of the wind. I stepped closer to the cabin, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The air inside was stale, with a faint smell of decay. As I shone the light around the cabin, I noticed something in the corner, a figure, huddled and small, rocking back and forth. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to speak. The figure slowly turned, and I could see it was a woman, her eyes hollow, her face gaunt and pale as if drained of life. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, a whisper, carried so softly on the wind it was almost mist, help me." I took a step back, fear rooting me to the spot as she stood up, her movements jerky and unnatural. The air grew colder, the edges of my vision blurring as if the darkness itself was closing in on me. She took a step towards me, her hand reaching out, and as she did, the light from my flashlight flickered and then went out, plunging us into darkness. In the pitch black, I could hear her whisper again, "Closer now, never alone, never again." The floorboards creaked under her weight as she moved nearer. I fumbled for the door, my heart racing, the cold seeping into my bones. Just as I felt her breath on my face, cold and damp, I burst through the door, the night air hitting me like a wall. Outside, the moon was obscured by fast-moving clouds, and the wind had picked up, howling through the trees like the cries of the damned. I turned to run back to the campsite to warn the others, but a fog had risen, thick and impenetrable, obscuring the path and muffling my footsteps. As I stumbled through the darkness, the whisper followed, a constant presence at the edge of my hearing, "Never alone, never again." My mind raced, panic setting in as the reality of the situation became clear. This was no ordinary forest, and we were not alone in it. Something had awakened here, something ancient and malevolent, and it had its sights set on us. As I ran, the fog seemed to thicken, swirling around me like a living thing, its cold fingers pulling at my clothes, slowing my escape. I called out for my friends, but the wind swallowed my cries, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever. Up ahead, I saw a faint light, the glow of the campsite fire reignited, casting a beacon of hope through the gloom. I pushed forward, my legs burning with effort, desperate to reach safety, to find my friends and escape this nightmare. But as I emerged from the fog, the campsite was eerily quiet, the fire burning low. The tents were all zipped up, no sign of movement inside. "Sarah? Mark?" I called, my voice breaking with fear. There was no response, just the crackle of the fire and the distant howl of the wind. Approaching Sarah's tent, I hesitated, the fabric rustling softly as if something moved within. I reached out, my hand shaking, and pulled back the zipper slowly. The zipper made a soft, grating sound as it slid open, the noise seeming loud in the oppressive silence of the night. Inside the tent, the flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, revealing Sarah's sleeping bag, empty, undisturbed. A chill ran down my spine as I realized she was not there, nor were there any signs of a struggle or hurried departure. Panic rising in my throat, I rushed to Mark's tent, fearing what I might find. His tent flap was also zipped shut, as if he had never emerged. I called his name, my voice breaking the eerie stillness. "Mark, are you in there?" No answer came, just the mournful howl of the wind, which seemed to mock my desperation. Reluctantly, I opened his tent, the scene inside mirroring Sarah's. Mark's gear was neatly arranged, his sleeping bag rolled out but empty. It was as though both of them had simply vanished into the cold, dark air. I stood back, looking around the campsite, my mind racing to make sense of what was happening. The fire crackled softly, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts in my head. "This can't be happening," I muttered to myself, gripping the flashlight tighter, as if it could anchor me in this nightmare. Fighting the urge to panic, I decided to look for any clues that might explain their sudden disappearance. As I scanned the area, my flashlight's beam fell on something near the fire, a piece of paper partially covered by a small stone. I picked it up, the paper cold and slightly damp. It was a note, written in Sarah's hurried scrawl. Heard something in the woods, sounded like someone crying. Going to check it out. Be right back. The note dropped from my numb fingers as I processed her words. They had heard it too, the same mournful cry that had led me to the cabin. A sinking feeling took hold as I realized that the sound might have been a lure, drawing us away from safety one by one. Determined to find my friends, I headed towards the forest, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and adrenaline. The woods seemed denser at night, the trees like towering specters, their branches clawing at the sky. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound a whisper of danger. As I walked, the air grew inexplicably colder, my breath visible in puffs of white. The flashlight's beam flickered intermittently, as if struggling to maintain its fight against the darkness. I called out for Sarah and Mark, my voice growing hoarse, the silence swallowing my calls. Suddenly, ahead in the darkness, I saw a faint light, similar to the one that had led me to the cabin. My mind screamed to turn back, but the possibility that it might be my friends kept me moving forward. As I approached, the light resolved into a lantern hanging from a tree branch, swinging gently as if touched by an unseen hand. Beneath the lantern, I found another note, this one in Mark's handwriting. Something's wrong. I followed the crying and it led me here. I can't find Sarah, but I'm going deeper into the woods. Something's calling me. A cold dread settled over me as I realized the forest was not just haunted, but hunting. It preyed on our fears, separated us, and led us deeper into its dark heart. With every step, I felt the woods closing in, a palpable sense of malice growing with each passing moment. Gathering my courage, I continued deeper into the forest, following what I hoped was the trail Mark had taken. The trees seemed to whisper amongst themselves, their leaves rustling despite the absence of wind. Shadows danced at the corner of my eye, figures that appeared and disappeared when looked at directly. Then, up ahead, I saw a figure, standing in a small clearing, illuminated by the moonlight that managed to pierce the canopy. My heart skipped a beat as I approached, slowly, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of moss. Mark? Sarah? I called out, hoping for a response. The figure turned slowly, its movements stiff and unnatural. As the moonlight fell upon its face, my blood turned to ice. It was neither Mark nor Sarah, but something else, something wrong. Its eyes were hollow, deep pools of darkness that seemed to draw in the light. Its mouth was a wide, gaping maw, as if it had been screaming for an eternity. I stopped, frozen in place by fear and the intense cold that seemed to emanate from the figure. It stared at me, and a voice, not its own, filled my head, a cacophony of whispers that made no sense yet spoke of ancient and terrible things. You should not have come here, it said, the voice a chilling echo in my mind. This forest guards its secrets well, and the price for trespassing is a heavy one. I wanted to run, to escape the nightmare that had enveloped me, but my legs wouldn't move. I was caught in the gaze of the creature, trapped by the dark spell of the forest. As the creature spoke, its voice a weaving tapestry of whispers and screams, I struggled to maintain my sanity. The forest around us seemed to close in, the trees bending toward the clearing as if drawn by the darkness that emanated from this ghastly figure. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath forming clouds in the chilling air. "You must pay the price," the creature hissed, its mouth barely moving as the words filled my head, echoing like a death knell. I couldn't move, couldn't think clearly as fear gripped my heart with icy fingers. Just then, a flicker of movement caught my eye, beyond the creature, deeper in the woods. Desperate for any sign of my friends, I focused on that movement, hoping beyond hope that it was Sarah or Mark. The creature noticed my distraction and turned slightly, revealing a path that led further into the darkness. It was a narrow, winding path, covered in overgrown vines and thorns that seemed to whisper and move of their own volition. "Follow if you dare," the creature taunted, stepping aside as if inviting me to pass. "But know that once you enter deeper into my realm, there is no return." My heart pounded in my chest as I weighed my options. The path could lead to my friends or deeper into a trap. But standing still was not an option. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, moving past the creature, which gave a low, menacing chuckle. The path was treacherous, the ground uneven, and every step seemed to echo through the forest, announcing my presence to the unseen horrors lurking in the shadows. The moon provided little light, filtered through the dense canopy, casting strange, dancing shadows that twisted and morphed into grotesque shapes. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot sent shocks of fear through me. I called out softly, "Sarah? Mark? Are you there?" My voice sounded small and weak in the oppressive darkness of the forest. No reply came, only the sound of my own footsteps and the constant, low whisper of the wind through the trees. After what felt like hours, the path suddenly opened into another clearing. This one was dominated by an ancient oak tree, its massive trunk wide and gnarled, branches reaching out like the arms of a giant. Beneath the tree was an old, stone well, its edges worn and covered in moss. Drawn to the well, I approached cautiously, the air growing colder as I neared. Peering over the edge, I saw that it was impossibly deep, the darkness within seeming to consume the beam of my flashlight. As I stared into the abyss, a cold draft emanated from the depths, carrying with it a faint sound like someone crying. The crying grew louder, more desperate, and I realized with a horrifying clarity that it sounded like Sarah. "Sarah, is that you?" I shouted, my voice echoing down into the dark well. The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by a deep, malevolent laugh that reverberated up from the depths. It was then that I felt a presence behind me. Turning slowly, I came face to face with a new apparition. It was an old man, his eyes hollow and his face twisted in a sinister grin. "You seek your friends?" he rasped, his voice as dry as the leaves underfoot. "They are here, with me, part of my forest now." but perhaps I can be persuaded to release them for a price. Fear turned to anger as I faced the old man. "What do you want?" I demanded, clenching my fists, ready to fight for my friends. "A trade," he said, his grin widening. "Your freedom for theirs. Stay in their place, and I will let them go." The offer hung in the air, heavy with malice. I glanced back at the well, the darkness within it seeming to pulse with malevolent life. My friend's safety was my priority, but could I trust this spectral figure? As I weighed my decision, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my choice. The suspense was unbearable, the night air filled with the anticipation of my answer. The old man's grin remained unchanging, a mask of glee at my torment. Just as I was about to speak, a new sound pierced the night, the distant howl of the wind, or perhaps something far more sinister, echoing through the trees, carrying with it new terrors, new decisions to be made. The howl resonated through the trees, a reminder that the forest was not just alive but malevolently aware. As I stood before the old man, whose smile seemed to stretch into eternity, I knew my decision would change everything. The trade, my freedom for my friends, was a sinister pact, but as the eerie sounds of the forest grew closer, the answer became clear. "I will not trade," I said firmly, my voice echoing around the clearing. "We will all leave, or none of us will." The old man's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing into slits of malevolence. "You are brave but foolish," he hissed, the air around him beginning to swirl with a dark mist. "No one defies me in my own domain." As he spoke, the ground beneath my feet trembled, and from the shadows of the trees, shapes began to emerge. They were ghastly apparitions, each face a distorted echo of human suffering and despair. My heart raced, fear threatening to overwhelm me, but I stood my ground. From the depths of my pocket, I pulled out a small, silver locket, a family heirloom that my grandmother had insisted I take on my journey. She had whispered of its protective powers, a charm blessed by the old ways. Clutching it in my hand, I felt a surge of warmth, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. "I am not alone," I declared, the locket held high. "This forest may be yours, but its power is not yours alone to command." As I spoke, the locket began to glow with a soft, silver light. The apparitions halted, their forms wavering as if in pain. The old man screamed, a sound so terrible it seemed to shake the very leaves from the trees. "You cannot," he shrieked, but the light from the locket grew brighter, illuminating the clearing with a celestial glow. The faces of the apparitions softened, their expressions morphing from pain to relief as they were bathed in the light. The ground stopped shaking, and the wind died down, the forest falling silent but for the soft sound of the locket's hum. One by one, the spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the air, released from their torment. "No." The old man was weakening, his form becoming translucent, his power waning under the light of the locket. "This is not over." "But it is," I said calmly, the locket still raised. "You will no longer hold sway over this forest or its souls." With a final, ear-piercing scream, the old man vanished, his presence extinguished like a snuffed flame. The locket's light dimmed, its job done, and I pocketed it with a nod of gratitude. The forest felt different now, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from its shoulders. I turned back to the well, peering into its depths once more. This time, instead of darkness, I saw the faint outline of a ladder leading upwards. "Sarah? Mark?" I called, hope rising in my chest. One by one, they emerged from the well, disoriented but unharmed, their faces mirroring my relief. We embraced, our reunion a mix of laughter and tears, the terror of the night already turning into a memory. As dawn broke, casting golden light through the trees, we made our way out of the forest. The path was clear, the air fresh, as if the forest itself was breathing easier. We didn't look back as we reached the edge of the woods, the sun rising fully now, promising a new day. Whatever darkness had held sway here was gone, dispelled by the light of an old charm and the strength of steadfast hearts. And though we spoke little of that night and the years that followed, the bond it forged between us was unbreakable. We had faced the darkest depths of the forest and emerged not just survivors, but victors, the keepers of a story that would, in time, pass into legend.